My name is Laurel Gwynn. I stood in my own kitchen as my mother, uninvited, told me I was the one who'd made her look bad. After years of quietly paying her bills, swallowing her comments, and fading into the background, something in me snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just told her the truth, then showed her the door. If any part of this story feels familiar, I hope you'll listen to the end. Then tell me, was I wrong for finally choosing myself? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I remember that day, not because anything dramatic happened, but because of how normal it all was. That's what made it stick. It wasn't the kind of memory that slams into you like a car crash. No, it was more like standing in a quiet room and realizing there's been a slow leak in the ceiling your whole life, and the whole damn thing's about to give out. It was early June in Asheville, and the house smelled like peach cobbler and lemon cleaner. I was standing at the kitchen counter, tossing a salad in that big green bowl my mother always uses when people are over. The fan above the stove clicked every few seconds. Outside, cicadas buzzed like static. From the living room came Sibley's voice, bright and easy, laughing about something her husband said. Of course, she was always laughing. It floated through the walls like she owned the house, the air, the story. Mom came in behind me, her footsteps soft like they always were when she didn't want to interrupt. Except, of course, she always did. That looks good, she said, reaching past me to grab the salt. Your sister never bothers to cook. But then, she's got Alan for that. Every girl has her talent, I suppose. She smiled like it was a compliment. I didn't say anything. Just kept stirring the salad, though I could barely feel the spoon in my hand. I'd heard comments like that my whole life. Quiet digs dressed up as casual observations. And usually I let them slide. I mean, what's the point, right? My job was to keep the peace. That's what I'd always told myself. But this time, something caught. Something in my chest tightened and wouldn't let go. I'd been sending her money every month for 4 years. Nothing big, just a few hundred. Automatic transfer, no fuss. No one in the family knew. She never talked about it. And I never asked for credit. But standing there, salad tongs in hand, I started wondering why. Why had I let it all go unnoticed? Why did it matter so little to her? Dinner was served outside. We had folding chairs and paper plates and those lemon napkins Mom only used when company came over. I took the folding chair by the cooler. Sibley got the Adirondack under the string lights. Mom sat between us, sipping from a glass of tea so sweet it could rot your teeth. Tell us about your job, Han, my uncle said at one point, turning toward me with genuine curiosity. Before I could answer, Mom waved a hand and chuckled. Oh, Laurel works in finance or accounting or something like that. Not quite a CPA, but close, I think. I was a financial operations manager. Not flashy, but solid. Real. I'd put myself through school while working part-time at a used bookstore. I'd clawed my way up with no favors. But in that moment, none of that mattered. I smiled politely and let it pass, just like always. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the cousins had gone home, it was just the two of us left in the kitchen. The air smelled like vanilla and the burnt crust of the cobbler. Mom sat at the table, swirling the last of her tea with a plastic straw. Her eyes were already drifting toward the TV remote. So, she said suddenly, any plans this summer? Me and Marcia were thinking of driving down to Florida. Nothing fancy. Just a little getaway. Sibley's been covering Olivia's dance camp, so I figured if you've got room, maybe you could help with the hotel. You know, just a bit. There was no, how are you? No, thanks for dinner. No curiosity about whether I even had vacation days. Just a casual request. Like I was a vending machine. Push the button, get the money. I looked at her for a long moment. The same woman who used to pack my lunch in brown paper bags, write little notes on napkins, who cried when I graduated college. And still, she didn't see me. I'll think about it, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She nodded, already flipping channels. And as I walked out the front door into the thick summer night, a thought rose up so clearly it might as well have been shouted in my ear. If I don't say something now, when will I ever? I closed the car door, hands trembling around the steering wheel. The salad had wilted in the heat. The tea had gone flat. And I felt like something inside me had cracked. Not broken. Just opened. And I didn't rush to patch it up. The next morning, I walked down to Willow Patch Cafe, like I always did on Saturdays. It was early enough that the sidewalks were still damp from the sprinklers, and the air smelled like cut grass and fresh bread from the bakery down the block. I liked that time of day, before the town fully woke up, before the world started asking for things. The cafe sat on the corner of Whitmore and 2nd, just far enough from downtown to stay quiet. It had chip tables, good coffee, and scones that always leaned a little too dry, but I liked the place. It was mine. Familiar. Predictable. As I stepped inside, the bell over the door jingled, and the barista, Lena, nodded at me like she always did. I ordered my usual, drip coffee with a splash of oat milk, and turned to scan for an empty table. That's when I saw her. Doreen Thatch, my neighbor from Pinecrest Circle, was tucked into the corner near the window, a crossword open in front of her, glasses low on her nose. She looked up and smiled like she'd been expecting me all along. "Well, look at this. Fate brought you to the blueberry table," she said, motioning to the empty chair across from her. I gave a tired smile. "Morning, Miss Doreen." "Oh, please, you're too old to miss me. Sit, Laurel. Let's share some mediocre baked goods and pretend they're amazing." I sat, mostly because I didn't have the energy to pretend I had somewhere better to be. We talked for a while, about the weather, her garden, how the birds kept knocking over her feeder. She told me she'd burned a pie the night before and threatened to never bake again. I knew she was lying. Doreen's pies were her religion. At some point, she tilted her head and looked at me the way people do when they're about to get personal but want to make it sound like a compliment. "You look tired, sweetheart. That kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. Your mom, she got you twisted up again, didn't she?" I froze for a second, coffee cup halfway to my mouth. I hadn't told anyone about last night. Not about the salad comment. Not the money. Not the ache that settled in my chest on the drive home, like a stone I couldn't cough up. "How did you?" Doreen cut me off with a soft laugh, not unkind. "She talks honey. At the florist. At the grocery store." With her voice just loud enough that people will hear, but pretend they're not listening. I didn't know what to say. My mother had always had this way of presenting me like a well-meaning disappointment. And apparently, I was the only one surprised. Doreen leaned in, lowered her voice, but her words hit like a slap anyway. "She told Marlene behind the flower counter that you were sweet, but you never really settled. Not like your sister. Said you float around like someone who's scared of real responsibility." My throat tightened. I pressed my fingers to the ceramic mug, grounding myself in the warmth. "She said that." Doreen nodded. Her eyes didn't waver. And you know what I said back? I told her I'd take one Laurel over 10 Sibleys if the world ever started spinning off its axis. Because you show up. Quietly. Steadily. Even when nobody claps for you. I blinked. Hard. She reached across the table, placed her hand gently over mine. Her skin was soft and thin, like linen worn from washing. "You don't owe anyone your shape, Laurel. Not even your mother. You've got the right to be different. You've got the right to be enough." The rest of the morning passed in a kind of haze. We finished our coffee, said goodbye, and I walked home slower than usual, dragging my feet like they were carrying more than just my body. Back in my apartment, I looked around at the things I'd bought myself. The bookshelf I built after my first raise, the little cactus I kept forgetting to water, the framed photo from my solo trip to Oregon where I smiled like I meant it. This space, this life, it wasn't glamorous. But it was mine. And I felt something I couldn't quite name. Not anger, exactly. But close. Something that felt like a heat rising from the inside. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I finally saw the fight that had been happening all along, and I wasn't willing to pretend it wasn't real anymore. I sat down on the edge of my bed, slipped off my shoes, and said it out loud just to see how it felt. She doesn't get to decide who I am. And just like that, something shifted. Not much. Not loud. But enough. The Gwynn family barbecue happened every summer, like clockwork. Same dusty folding chairs, same plastic tablecloths that stuck to your skin in the heat. My Uncle Roger still wore his Kiss the Cook apron even though he hadn't cooked a single thing since 2008. The kids ran barefoot through the yard, and the adults rotated between the grill and the cooler like it was some unspoken ritual. I arrived early, as usual. I brought potato salad from scratch, Mom's favorite, and 2 extra bags of ice, just in case. No one ever told me to bring anything, but somehow I always did. I helped set the tables, lined up the paper plates, and filled pitchers with sweet tea. Sibley showed up 20 minutes late in a sundress and wedge heels, waving like she was doing the yard a favor by gracing it with her presence. Alan carried a cooler, and their daughter, Olivia, danced up the walkway in a rainbow tutu. The whole yard seemed to brighten the moment they arrived. Later, as we sat in a circle of lawn chairs, my cousin Melanie turned to Mom and asked casually, "So, Laurel's a manager now, right?" "That's what I heard." Mom didn't even look at me. She gave that little shrug, the one that always came before something she could claim was harmless. "I guess, but she told me she's still trying to get her finances in order. You know how it is. Takes her a bit longer to land on her feet." The words were soft, almost caring, like she was explaining away a child's late homework. I was standing 3 feet behind her, holding a tray of watermelon slices. And I hadn't said any of that. Not once. My jaw clenched so tight, I thought I'd crack a molar. I kept my smile frozen in place, passed the fruit around like nothing was wrong. But inside, my ribs felt like they were splintering. After dinner, most people gathered near the fire pit, roasting marshmallows and talking over each other. I slipped inside to help clear dishes. Sibley had already vanished. She never touched a sponge unless it was part of a facial. So it was just me and Mom in the kitchen, side by side at the sink. The clink of forks against porcelain filled the space between us. I waited until I could speak without my voice shaking. "Hey, Mom. I don't remember telling you I was struggling financially."
She didn't look at me.
Just kept rinsing. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that," she said, light as air. "I was just making conversation. Trying to fill in the gaps. You know how people ask questions." I dried a plate slowly, letting the towel glide over the edge. But it wasn't true. She shrugged again. That shrug, God, it crawled under my skin like ants. "It's not a big deal. Don't be so sensitive, Laurel. People don't take everything literally. And besides, it made you seem relatable. No one likes a show-off." I stared at her. I wasn't showing off. I was just existing. For the first time, I realized she didn't see me. Not really. She saw some version of me that fit the script she liked to perform in front of others. The daughter who was a little lost, a little slow to grow up. Not as brilliant as Sibley, not as magnetic, but sweet enough and useful when needed. I set the dish towel down and leaned against the counter. "I work hard," I said quietly. "I've worked hard for everything I have. You know that." She paused, just for a beat, then rinsed another plate. "I never said you didn't. Don't twist my words." "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "I'm just tired of being talked about like I'm some side character in my own story." She finally turned to look at me. Her expression was unreadable, cool, collected, almost amused. "Well," she said, "I guess I just assumed you didn't care what people thought. You've always been different." She said it like it was a flaw. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just walked outside, past the fire pit, past the cousins laughing with sticky hands, and sat in my car with the door closed and the windows rolled up. For a long time, I didn't even start the engine. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying her words. The tone, the shrug, the easy dismissal of my entire reality. And something in me cracked. Not loud. Not sudden. Just cracked like a hairline fracture that had been there all along, finally deciding it was done holding weight. Maybe she didn't need to understand me. Maybe she just needed me to stay where I'd always been. Quiet. Useful. Unnoticed. But I couldn't do that anymore. It was a Thursday night when I finally sat down to look at my bank statements. I hadn't planned to. I'd just come back from the grocery store, realized I was stretching a little thinner than usual, and opened the app out of habit more than urgency. The automatic transfer to my mother's account had gone through 3 days earlier, $400 this time. I remembered her text from the week before. Groceries are just so expensive these days. And the AC repair guy was outrageous. If you can send a little more this month, that would help. It wasn't a demand. It never was. It was always just a sentence wrapped in something soft enough to make me feel like refusing it would be cruel. Scrolling back, I saw how the amount had crept up over time. It used to be $150, then $200, then $300. Always after some excuse: a new water heater, a dental cleaning, a trip she couldn't afford to cancel. I stared at the numbers for a long time, the quiet in my apartment pressing in on me like fog. I'd never questioned it before. Never once asked who else was pitching in. Something in me flickered. I picked up the phone and called Sibley. She answered on the third ring. I could hear the background hum of television and Alan mumbling something about the remote. "Hey, everything okay?" she asked. Yeah, I just had a quick question," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Do you ever help Mom out financially?" There was a pause. "Well, I mean, sometimes I'll grab her groceries if we're out together. I paid for her phone upgrade last year, but that was mostly because Alan gets a discount through work." "Why?" I swallowed. "So, you're not sending money regularly? Like monthly?" Another pause.
No.
"I kind of thought you had that covered. I mean, Mom said you were doing great at work, so I just figured." I let out a breath, slow and quiet. It wasn't anger I felt. Not quite. More like clarity, the kind that clicks into place like the last piece of a puzzle you didn't realize was missing. "Okay," I said. "That's all I needed." "You good?" Sibley asked, voice a little more cautious now. "Yeah," I lied. "I'm fine." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, staring at the blank screen in my hand. All this time, I'd believed I was one of many, that the weight was being shared. But it wasn't. It had never been. I was the backup plan, the reliable one, the one who didn't ask questions. And Mom, she let me believe it was my duty, like I owed it to her, like love looked like silence and deposits. I opened a blank text and started typing. "Mom, I've been looking at my finances, and I don't think I can continue sending the same amount every month." I stared at it, reread it, deleted it. Then I typed it again, this time with less explanation. "I won't be sending money next month." Backspace the whole thing. I thought about calling her, just saying it, getting it over with. But my fingers hovered over the call button, unmoving. What if she cried? What if she said I was selfish? What if she said nothing at all? Doreen's voice came back to me, soft and certain. "You've got the right to say no." It felt radical, that sentence, like something I was never supposed to believe. I closed the app and sat there in the dim kitchen light, the air still and heavy around me. And then, without warning, I opened my bank app and paused the auto transfer. Just one tap. No ceremony. I didn't send the money. The silence after was loud. I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting it to ring, half hoping it wouldn't. Hours passed. Nothing. I went to bed and lay there with the screen face down beside me, my heart thudding like I'd done something irreversible. Maybe I had, but I didn't feel regret.
Not yet.
All I felt was the strange, uncertain quiet of a door I had always assumed was locked, now slightly ajar. I didn't know if Mom would call tomorrow or next week, or not at all. But one thing I did know, I wouldn't be apologizing for turning the lock. 3 weeks went by, and the phone didn't ring. At first, I kept checking it like it was broken. I'd pick it up just to make sure the signal was still there, scroll through text threads that hadn't moved, reread our last message, me confirming I was thinking about the budget this month, her giving a thumbs up that somehow felt more like a test than approval. I told myself I wasn't waiting. I told myself it was a relief, this silence. But if I was being honest, a part of me still worried. Was she okay? Had something happened? Then again, there was something else underneath that worry, something lighter. A quiet that I hadn't felt in years. A space between myself and obligation. And I realized I wasn't holding my breath anymore. Doreen invited me over for dinner that Saturday. Her house always smelled like cinnamon and something vaguely floral, even when nothing was baking. She made roasted chicken and mashed sweet potatoes, and we sat at her tiny kitchen table with 2 chipped wine glasses and 1 candle that flickered like it had something to say. She looked at me over the rim of her glass and asked, "Still no word?" I shook my head. Not a text, not a missed call. She nodded slowly, like someone adding up an old equation she already knew the answer to. "You know," she said, "when I was married to Richard's father, I used to think silence was a gift. No yelling, no fighting. I thought that meant things were fine. But then one night, we had dinner, just the 2 of us, and didn't say a single word, not even past the salt. And that's when I knew we were done. I didn't say anything, just kept cutting my chicken into smaller and smaller pieces. There's more than one kind of hurt," she went on. "Sometimes the worst kind is the one that never makes a sound." 3 days after that, my phone finally rang. It was just after lunch, and I almost didn't answer. But something in me said it was time. "Hello." Her voice came through sharp and clear. "Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised you're still alive." No hello. No check-in. Just that. I leaned back on the couch, resting my free hand on my thigh to keep it from trembling. "I've been waiting to see how long it would take you," she continued. "You know, Marcia asked me the other day if you were okay. Said she hadn't heard you mention your next visit. And you know what I had to say? Nothing. Because I didn't know what to say."
I didn't reply.
"And now people are starting to talk. Wondering why you're not stepping up. Wondering what happened to the good daughter. You don't think that makes me look bad?" I blinked, slow and deliberate. My chest tightened, but not the way it used to. It was more like bracing for a storm you already know is coming. She kept going. "I mean, if you're having a hard time, that's one thing. You could have just said that. But don't leave me hanging like this. It's embarrassing. I've spent years defending you, Laurel. Years." I took a deep breath. Counted to 4. I didn't think not sending money for 1 month would erase years. Well, it does if people start asking questions. I can't have them thinking I raised an ungrateful daughter. I felt my spine straighten. My throat ached like something was lodged in it, but my voice came out steady. "Mom, I don't owe you a version of me that makes you look good." There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear her blink. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired of performing," I said. "I'm tired of pretending that love looks like giving and giving until there's nothing left. I've spent years making sure your needs were met, even when mine weren't. I've done it quietly, respectfully. But I won't do it just to maintain some perfect image for your friends." Another pause. "Well," she said sharply, "if you're gonna act like this, I'll be honest with people. I won't protect you from their judgments anymore." And there it was. The threat. Wrapped in maternal concern but sharpened just enough to draw blood. "I'll tell them the truth," she said. "That I've always tried. That you've drifted. That you changed." My hand was gripping the phone so tightly I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. "Go ahead," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "Tell them whatever you want. But I'm done living in a story I didn't write." I hung up before I could hear her answer. For a long time, I sat on the edge of the couch, phone still in my hand, heart pounding so loud it felt like a second voice in the room. But I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. Instead, I breathed. And for the first time in my adult life, I realized what she feared losing most wasn't me. It was control over me. A few mornings after that phone call, the one where I'd finally hung up without apologizing, I woke up to a message from my mother. It wasn't her usual kind. No half sentences, no passive-aggressive smiley face at the end. Just paragraph after paragraph of dense, wordy grief. She wrote, "I'm not trying to guilt you, but Laurel, I'm getting older. I don't know how much time I have left. And I'd hate for the last thing between us to be this silence. It was never about the money, it's about family. You used to care about that. I don't know what changed." I sat there in bed, the phone heavy in my hand. I didn't scroll or skim. I read every word, slow and deliberate, like each line was a loaded question I had to answer for in court. I could picture her sitting in her recliner, legs tucked under, phone perched in one hand, that expression on her face like she was already the wounded party before she even hit send. She'd probably typed and deleted it 3 times, adjusting the tone just enough to say, "I'm the victim here," without actually saying it.
Part of me wanted to cry.
Not because of what she said, but because of how familiar it felt.
The same tug at my chest.
The same guilt trickling in like water under a door I never locked. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. The old script was there, word for word. "I didn't mean to upset you, Mom. I love you. Can we talk?" Maybe I overreacted. But this time I didn't go there. I took a breath. Then I typed. "I've spent most of my life trying to be the version of a daughter you could be proud of. But I think what you really wanted was someone obedient. Someone small enough to make you feel big. I can't do that anymore. I won't." I hit send before I could rewrite it softer. It felt like free-falling, but not into fear. Into truth. That afternoon, Sibley's name lit up my phone. I hesitated. She almost never called unless it involved birthdays or casseroles or figuring out which cousin was hosting Thanksgiving. I answered. "Hey," she said. Her voice was tight. "So, I talked to Mom." Of course she had. "I figured," I said, keeping my tone flat. "She's really upset. Not that I didn't expect it, but I just thought maybe we could all take a breath. Let this simmer down." I didn't answer. Then she said it soft, almost playful. "It's family stuff, Laurel. We don't need to make it a big deal." Something inside me buckled. "It's always not a big deal to you," I said. "Because you're not the one holding it." There was silence on her end. "I've been carrying Mom's guilt for years, Sibley. All the whispered jabs, the late-night check-ins, that were really about keeping me in line. I've been paying her bills, tiptoeing around her moods, nodding through her rewrites of reality. And not once, did you ever ask if I was okay with that." She exhaled. "Well, she's always leaned on you more. I mean, I have a lot going on. A husband, a kid. You know that." There it was. The subtle shifting of responsibility, like it was just logistics. "So, because I don't have a family of my own, that makes me the default caregiver? The emotional cleanup crew?" "I didn't say that," she replied, uneasy. "You didn't have to." There was another pause. Then she said, "I'm just trying to keep the peace." I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, but because I'd used that line myself for most of my life. That's what I've been trying to do for 39 years. The call ended without ceremony. I sat there for a while, phone in hand, staring at nothing in particular. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel betrayed. I felt done. Later that evening, I logged into my bank account. I stared at the screen for a moment, then scrolled to the scheduled payments tab. I clicked cancel on the monthly transfer to my mother's account. Then I deleted the app completely. My fingers trembled, not out of fear but release. Like they didn't know what to do with all this space they suddenly had. I didn't do it to punish her. I didn't do it to make a statement. I did it because I was finally willing to choose myself. Not in spite of the family I came from, but because I had survived them. That night, I didn't think about who would be disappointed or confused or gossiping at the next family cookout.
I thought about me.
And the woman I was finally becoming, free of apology, free of permission, and standing in a truth that no longer needed to be small enough to keep everyone else comfortable. She showed up on a Tuesday afternoon. No call. No text. Just 3 firm knocks at my door, spaced evenly like she'd rehearsed it. And then silence. The kind of silence that doesn't fill a room, but tightens it. When I opened the door, there she was, standing like she was about to step into a Sunday service. Lavender blouse, pearl buttons neatly fastened, lipstick a little too bright for mid-afternoon. In her hands, a white paper bag from Meyer's Bakery. "I brought the blueberry muffins you like," she said, forcing a smile. "Still warm." I didn't smile back.
I didn't speak.
I just studied her for a second. This woman who had shaped my entire sense of self-worth and now stood at my threshold like she belonged there. "I thought maybe we could talk," she added, shifting the bag in her hands. "I know things have been tense." I stepped aside, slowly. Not because I wanted to let her in, but because I needed to know if I was truly ready not to fold. She sat down at the kitchen table like she used to, years ago, before time and resentment turned visits into obligations. She looked around like she was trying to remember what parts of my life she hadn't bothered to ask about. "Well," she started, carefully unfolding the bag, "I figured I'd come say my piece. We can't stay like this forever." I pulled out a chair, sat across from her. My hands rested in my lap.
My jaw was already tight.
"What piece is that, Mom?" She met my eyes for just a second, and I saw the flicker of challenge, of self-righteousness, before she cast it off.
"You've made your point, I suppose. I heard what you said."
"I just didn't think you'd take it this far. Cutting off your own mother." I tilted my head. "I didn't cut you off. I stopped doing what I no longer had the strength to do." She scoffed and reached for a napkin from the counter, dabbing at nothing. "I just don't understand how you can be so cold. I had to ask Marcia to help with my cable bill last week. Do you think that felt good? Having to explain why my daughter suddenly stopped supporting me." There it was again. The guilt, gift-wrapped as wounded pride. I felt the familiar pull. But it didn't drag me under this time. "Do you know what didn't feel good?" I said softly. "Hearing you tell people I was unstable, that I couldn't manage my life. Listening to you rewrite my story while smiling like you were proud of me." Her expression hardened. "I only ever wanted you to do better. To be better." I leaned forward.
"No."
"You wanted me to behave. You wanted a daughter who did the work, took the blame, and stayed quiet. You didn't want better. You wanted obedient." She looked like she might cry, but not because she regretted anything. More because she hated being confronted. "You don't feel bad about how you treated me," I continued. "You feel bad that now people might see the truth. That they might stop applauding the version of motherhood you've been selling all these years." She blinked.
"Once. Twice."
Then her mouth curled, not into a smile, but into something sharp. "So this is who you are now?" she asked.
"Cold.
Unforgiving." I shook my head.
"No."
"This is who I've always been. You just weren't listening." She glanced down at the muffins, like they might offer a better answer than I could. "I came here to make peace, Laurel. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stood up slowly. My legs didn't tremble. My breath didn't hitch. "I don't hate you, Mom," I said. "But I'm done playing the part you wrote for me. From now on, I live my life. Not the version of it that makes you look good." She stood too, stiff and tall like she had something to protect. "Well," she said, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeve, "I suppose there's nothing else to say." I walked to the door and opened it. "You can leave the muffins," I said. "But I'm not taking anything else." She walked past me, without another word. The sound of her heels against the tile echoed like punctuation, sharp, final. At the threshold, she paused, her back still to me. "You'll regret this one day," she said, not looking back. I didn't answer. I closed the door behind her, clicked the deadbolt, and leaned my back against it, feeling the cool wood against my spine. The room was still. My chest didn't ache. My throat didn't burn. No adrenaline. No tears. Just air. I slid down to the floor and sat there, knees tucked to my chest, palms resting on the hardwood. I listened, not for her footsteps, not for the phone to ring, but to the quiet. And it didn't sound like absence. It sounded like room. It sounded like freedom, like someone had opened a door I never knew was locked, and then left it wide open behind them. 2 months passed. Not dramatically, not with any grand declarations or fireworks. Just quietly, like a season turning while you're too busy living to notice the leaves changing. My life looked the same, mostly. I still got up early, still walked to Willow Patch on Saturdays for my coffee and half-stale scone. I still watered the plants on my little balcony, though I'd stopped apologizing to the rosemary bush every time I forgot for a day or two. But something had shifted. The air inside my apartment didn't feel tight anymore. The silence wasn't charged. When my phone buzzed, my stomach didn't flip with dread. Most of the time, I didn't even glance at it right away. Mom never called again. No texts. No voicemails. No surprise visits with bakery bags in hand. At first, the silence felt wrong. Like I'd broken something I couldn't fix. I'd stare at the phone for a few seconds too long, wondering if she was okay, if she was angry, if she was telling the whole family I'd turned into someone heartless. But as the days passed, that anxious hum faded. And something new crept in, relief. Some silences aren't hollow. Some mean space.
Some mean peace.
I started breathing easier in that quiet. One night, Doreen invited me over to look through old photo albums. She'd been cleaning her closet and pulled out a box from the '70s full of worn corners and yellowing pages. We sat on her living room floor, cross-legged with wine glasses perched beside us, flipping through a lifetime of snapshots. There was one photo, her and a woman with a wide smile and thick glasses, arms linked, standing in front of a red truck. "That's Beverly," she said, tapping the image. "My best friend for 20 years. She stopped talking to her family when she was 35. Said she couldn't keep pretending to be someone they approved of. Lived alone the rest of her life. But you know what? She lived honestly. No regrets." I studied the picture. They looked so free, like they belonged to themselves. "Do you think I'm a bad daughter?" I asked, not looking at her. Doreen shook her head. "Bad is living a lie and resenting everyone for not noticing. What you did, that was brave. And honest. Those two things rarely come cheap." The next morning, I woke up to a message from my niece, Sibley's daughter. I hadn't heard from her in months. We used to be close, back when she was younger, and didn't know she was supposed to pick sides. It was just a few lines. "Hi, Aunt Laurel. I know things have been tense in the family. I just wanted to say,
I've always looked up to you.
even if nobody said it out loud. You always seemed like the one who saw everything clearly." I read it twice. Then I smiled. Then I cried, not the kind of crying that curls you up in a ball, but the kind that rinses you clean from the inside out. The following Sunday, I had Doreen and two of her friends from book club over for dinner. I made garlic bread and a pot of lentil soup. Nothing fancy. No tablecloths. No fuss. We sat at my small kitchen table, elbows brushing, laughing over stories I didn't know the endings to. The room felt full. Not in the way family holidays used to feel, chaotic, performative, but warm.
Easy.
I looked around and thought, this is family too. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet again, I pulled out the old journal I used to keep in my 20s. Most of it was filled with lists, things to do, things to fix about myself, things I thought would finally make me enough. I flipped to a blank page, wrote my full name in the middle of the page. Laurel Gwynn. Then I added, the daughter who stopped apologizing. The woman who learned the difference between being accepted and being seen. Who chose peace over performance. Truth over tradition. I set the pen down and whispered to the quiet room, almost like a prayer. Maybe I don't need to be loved the way they love. I just need to be free to love myself the way I was meant to. And for once, that felt like more than enough. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't walking away, it's realizing you were never really seen in the first place. And yet, choosing yourself, choosing truth over comfort, clarity over approval, it's a quiet kind of strength. If this story felt familiar to you, even in small ways, I hope you know you're not alone. Maybe you've been the one keeping the peace. Maybe you've been the one carrying more than your share just to keep things from falling apart. But you don't have to earn love by shrinking yourself. You deserve to be held with honesty, not with conditions. Have you ever felt like it was time to let go of a version of yourself that no longer felt true? If this story stayed with you, even after the last line, I hope you'll join me again for the next one. There are more truths worth telling.